Phil Mackey, the Mackey and Judd Show, 1500 ESPN Minnesota, joins us now to talk a little bit more about this Minnesota team. And Phil, when we look at the Eagles in Minnesota, I mean, there's a lot of similarities between these teams and a lot of synergy on the way this game is going to go on Sunday with the quarterbacks and Shermer. I mean, there's a lot of intriguing storylines.
There is. Thank you for having me. First of all, I feel like I've been fighting with Eagles fans on our radio show and Twitter. Eagles fans have infiltrated our radio show the last couple days. It's been fun, but the similarities aren't just for this year. If you look historically, and I find it fascinating the way that both tortured fan bases sort of handle it on the outside. Like Vikings fans and Minnesota sports fans, we're very much self-aware about where our teams stand. We know it's been a bad run lately. We're not delusional about our history. We don't thump our chests for titles won 50 years ago. And I feel like maybe it's a small representation, but the Philadelphia sports fans that have called in to trash talk Minnesota, and I'm like, wait a second, time out. I think the Phillies won a title 10 years ago. The Vikings and Eagles, neither one has won a Super Bowl, but they're both wildly successful in the regular season for the most part. And beyond that, we got to go back to like the early 80s and the 70s and like the Minneapolis Lakers for Minnesota. So, but I think the similarities go way back, even in the history between the Eagles and the Vikings.
Yeah, we were talking and kind of laughing because we know the Eagles fans' reputation nationwide about why the Eagles aren't looked at like the Cubs, like the lovable losers, like, a team that always gets so close and then never gets there. And then, of course, you take a look at their fan base and their reputation. That's why they're not the lovable losers. But is that the Vikings? Are the Vikings akin to the Chicago Cubs?
A little bit. I think there might be some Red Sox similarities here, too, in terms of, all these – the Cubs and the Red Sox both had these iconic moments over the course of their, 86 years for the Red Sox and 108 years for the Cubs. Iconic failures and moments where you just – like the fan base just crumbles to their knees. And the Vikings, we hold conversations with each other in the Twin Cities. You run into a Vikings fan at a grocery store or something, and you can hold full conversations by just mentioning the year in which the devastation happened. Man, how about the Vikings? Yeah, man, that 1998 team. Oh, my God. What about 09, Favre? Yeah. And so people are hoping in the Twin Cities that the Stephon Diggs 61-yard touchdown reception, which was a complete jolt across the entire state. It was a lightning bolt inside of U.S. Bank Stadium. People are hoping that has the same effect as maybe the Dave Roberts stolen base in Game 4 of the ALCS, where the Red Sox are down 3-0. They're down by a run in the ninth inning. Here we go again, another blown chance to win it all. And then all of a sudden, boom, a lightning bolt hits, and your franchise changes. I mean, that's what people are hoping that play was against the Saints.
Yeah, Phil Mackey from 1500 ESPN. But on the flip side, is there a hangover? Is that like still being talked about? I mean, they're getting asked about that because I read some crazy stat that the last 5 times a play has ended on the last play of the game, that team has lost in the next round, and a lot of those games haven't been close. It seems like you get this hallelujah play, and then boom, you come crashing down the next week.
Yeah, I think I've said this on our show this week. It's a great question, and I think if this was college football, if you just upset the number 1 team in the country, where you rolled in and you beat Alabama, I think almost guaranteed letdown the next week. In fact, if you're a sports bettor, you're looking for those letdowns, right? You're looking for big time, emotional, national TV win. Okay, I'm going to fade that team the next week. Well, Mike Zimmer is such a great coach in terms of keeping everything focused. I mean, players are already, as of yesterday, players are already annoyed by the questions. Hey, 24-hour rule, and no one's really, I mean, they're getting asked about it, but nobody's really elaborating on the play anymore. So I think a Mike Zimmer coach team is much less likely to still have a hangover from that play. It doesn't guarantee that the Vikings are going to beat the Eagles, but I don't think that's going to be a main factor in the game's outcome.
Phil Mackey with us from Minneapolis to give us the outside view. What player or thing about the Eagles, Phil, are the Vikings fans most concerned about this week on your show? What name keeps coming up of a Philadelphia Eagle to your fan base out there?
I think it's the defense and the atmosphere in general, and I would even add the turf. There's been a lot of talk about just like the playing surface, and the Vikings, people always think about indoor artificial surfaces as being beneficial to offenses, but the Vikings defense has really benefited. It's a really fast defense from playing on artificial surface. And one of their losses was on the road against the Carolina Panthers, kind of a shoddy surface. It limited the speed for the defense, and they allowed a couple big plays on defense that they wouldn't, characteristically allow. So, and then you just look up and down. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that Matt Ryan and Julio Jones had trouble scoring points in that same environment. And teams in general haven't. Like, the Vikings aren't going to roll in and score 31 points unless there's a bunch of fluke touchdowns. But then again, I don't know if I see the Eagles and Nick Foles scoring more than 21 or 24 points either. Like, the over-under is 38.5 when I checked yesterday, and that's a really low over-under for an NFL football game, but it almost feels astronomically high for this one. Like, am I off on that? I'm taking the under, but it almost makes me feel like I'm getting duped.
Yeah, no, it feels like you're right. The Eagles give up 10 last week, and realistically, Phil, I mean,
right, if
Atlanta only scores
the special teams play. That would be Atlanta's only touchdown.
Yeah, Atlanta only scores because the Philly had 2 special teams turnovers, blunders, and Atlanta ends up scoring on that. Otherwise, they didn't move the ball at all. And you're right. I mean, I think Matt Ryan Jones is probably an upgrade over the whole Keenum thing, though, is so interesting. Like, how we were talking to one of your Vikings guys earlier in the week, and we asked him, like, if the Vikings could pick a guy healthy right now to lead them, it almost seems like Keenum would be the third guy that they would choose, yet he's the guy they have.
Oh, like if you're going to rank their quarterbacks again? Yeah. Well, I think to say that Sam Bradford, if he were healthy, he's missed half of the possible games over the past 5 years. So I feel bad for him because when he's healthy and when he has a good infrastructure, and he's had one here in Minnesota, he is really good. And he showed some flashes at times with Philadelphia too. But Case Keenum is going to be a really interesting one here in the off season. Right now, it's really easy to have quarterback beer goggles and say, especially for Vikings fans, like they haven't had a franchise quarterback. Dante Culpepper was here for 5 years and then shredded his knee. Otherwise, it's been patchwork quarterbacks and Teddy Bridgewater. I don't know if I want to give $50 million guaranteed over multiple years to Case Keenum's one good season. But Teddy Bridgewater is still going to be available to bring back in the mix. But, yeah, you're right. Right now, if all 3 guys were healthy, Sam Bradford would actually be their best. He threw for 350 yards in week 1 and 3 touchdowns, and then couldn't answer the bell for week 2.
Phil Mackey's with us. So, Phil, going back to what you said about the turf, and I've been on that turf, not for a couple of years, but I've been on. It's like painted dirt is essentially what it is. To call it a grass field is probably being generous. So, with that in mind, and you mentioned that they're one of their losses, how much do you think playing outside changes things for the Vikings?
It's hard to pinpoint why it matters so much, but I do think it matters. I think it's worth a non-zero amount of points. I don't know if it's 3 points or if it's 5 points, but it is worth a non-zero amount of points defensively. And it's going to be very interesting to see if, like, a slipped wide receiver or I guess I could see a play in the second half, whether it's the Vikings or the Eagles. Let's say Stephon Diggs goes out on a route, falls down because of the turf, and Keenum throws an interception, or vice versa. Alshon Jeffrey goes down. Like, I could see a game-changing turnover solely happen because of somebody slipping on the turf. I mean, not that can't happen. It's happened on artificial surfaces too, but that's the one thing as fans kind of look at, if this is going to be a close game and if it's going to be a low-scoring environment, what are the fluky little things that could happen that sway this game? And that's definitely one of them.
Phil Mackey, 1500 ESPN Twin Cities with us here on the Bash, 97.3 ESPN. Do you sense pressure because the Super Bowl is in Minnesota?
Yes, absolutely. And this has always been on the radar, for a couple years. And the Vikings had an 11-5 team a couple years ago, and so people started talking even 2 years ago. Man, Mike Zimmer can coach defense, and you got a franchise quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater, and they've already been to the playoffs. What happens if the Vikings keep on this run for a couple of years? Well, here we are, knocking on the door, and now you face one of 2 options. You face maybe the most jubilation and elation you've ever had as a fan base if you win this game on Sunday, and then you get to celebrate for 2 weeks until maybe the Patriots come to town, and you get to celebrate your home Super Bowl and all the national attention and the world basically coming down here to the Twin Cities. But the other option is the Eagles win, and you get a bunch of Donnies and Vitos coming up to Minneapolis and trash talking us for 2 weeks. They've all been calling our radio show for the last 2 days, and so and then all that goes with having to deal with the depression of coming so close to a home Super Bowl.
Oh. That's got to be unbelievable. And the fact, you got the third-string quarterback, you got this heaven play, you got the Super Bowl there. These guys got to be staring at the ceiling tonight like, my gosh, I can't believe the situation we are in right now. Like, I can't imagine being a member of that team. But the synergy between these two, you've got, Brad Childress, Leslie Frazier, Pat Shurmur. You got Bradford, the quarterback situation with Keenum and Foles. You go back to the stinking Joe Webb game, PT. I was at that game Tuesday night. Who plays on a damn Tuesday night?
I was
and
there.
Joe Webb stuck it to us. So I was there for that one. It should be another.
You can go back even further than that. We're like, historically, the Vikings are like BASF for the Eagles, where we don't make a lot of the products you buy. We make a lot of the products you buy better. Chris Carter in the early 90s to the Vikings and then became a Hall of Fame receiver. And I'll throw this one on the pile too. Randall Cunningham's best season as a passer in 1998 with Randy Moss as a rookie.
That's just threw a couple of great names out of us there.
Randall, Chris Carter, all he does is catch touchdowns. Hey, before we let you go, Sendejo, you think he's going to play?
So I believe he's still going through. I think he was limited at practice today, I want to say, and it's a 50-50 shot right now. If he doesn't play, Harrison Smith is the best safety in the NFL, although he inexplicably got left off the Pro Bowl roster, even though he's a first-team NFL AP All-Pro. But Andrew Sendejo, he had that amazing interception off Drew Brees, and he is a headhunter, as much as you can be in today's NFL. So if he doesn't play, that's a pretty big loss for the Vikings. He's not one of their 5 best defensive players, but he does play a really key role, the back end of that defense. But it's kind of a coin flip right now.
All right, it's the Vikings in Philly for the NFC Championship game. Phil Mackey and Judd, 1500 ESPN. Phil, appreciate the time, man.
Good stuff, guys. May the best tortured franchise win on Sunday.